story that is adaptable seems like a huge leap into the future of literature. Where do you see this heading?
Ooh, can I jump on that first,
Yes,
sir?
yes.
Thank you. I've been thinking a ton about that to the point where I have these dreams where I'm going to get a PhD, which I don't think I will. I have the crazy MFA, and I'll leave it at that for a while. But sorry, brain fart bubble right there. That we've talked about it. That this is kind of. I mean, I don't want to denigrate it, but it's kind of a beta test in a way. I think we both agree. Whereas interesting it's like we've talked about it. What if you have an entire novel? What if you have a series of novels that have something like this? What if you have, oh god, I just brain farted the term I had. Dang it. Kind of reactive literature. What if you had reactive literature in terms of fiction on a larger scale? What if a full length novel can grow and shift and morph and is never. Oh yeah, the other thing I should point on are 2 questions ago. Sorry, but I'll toss it out here because it fits. Hopefully, is that when I was a teenager, I wrote a poem about how finishing a poem is like killing something, and my relatives thought it was nuts. But I think it applies. It applies to the answer again. Ferris wheels again. But that I wrote a poem at 19, and it was about how that poem is this sad, pale little innocent sort of insect creature crushed under my typewriter key because it was back in the day, and it was how can something really be finished? And having degrees in writing, especially, you're taught that everything has to be finished. If you look at famous novelists and short story writers in history, they're like, oh, I had this pile of papers, oh, I had this thing, this project, this all these kind of mundane terms. But once it was published, it suddenly became a thing, and it had all these sort of bells and whistles to it. And we kind of have taken that for granted for hundreds of years. And it was, why does it have to be finished? Why does something need to be finished? Why does that crown something as becoming something more? What if things don't have to be finished? There, I've come back to my point. Good. So what if you have full-length books that are never quite finished? What if they adapt in ways that are even more advanced? And then the thing that has me dreaming of PhDs at night, which is kind of strange because it's been a while, but is I was talking to Damon about it recently. What if you think about newspapers have been dying, right? And media and print is in this weird place right now where it's like, oh yeah, no one really wants to do the old stuff anymore, and the new stuff it's different. And how do we like it ties back to the classes you guys are taking. Actually, there's a moment right now where millions and millions of dollars are being floated around in publishing going, how do we make it more intelligent? How do we make it more like what people do on smartphones? How do we make it more engaging? How do we take digital narratives, wink wink, that class that I teach taught, how do we place that into something that brings the paradigms together? And honestly, no one's quite figured it out yet. And we're in this weird place right now where there's kind of this chasm in between, which is kind of what got us talking about this to begin with. But the larger crazy scope is like, so what if in the future you take something like the New York Times, or you take a larger magazine like Rolling Stone or Time, and what if they have a reactive sort of port online, and the engagement people have with this nonfiction material changes it, alters it? What if there becomes some sort of relationship with the reader? It kind of makes sense, and it could bring the paradigms together. But we're tinkering with what might happen in the future here. So
Yeah, we intentionally, like you mentioned, like it's like not to put the project down, but like it's a beta test. I think you mentioned your earlier project that had tons and tons of really cool ideas, and then it's like, oh crap, it's 2 months before the show, so we have to amputate all of those, and like one little thing goes through. We're trying to not do that. So like this is partially my software development background coming through, but like let's look at what we can reasonably do and actually make it so that we do the thing, as opposed to get up to like the last minute beforehand and then cancel 90% of the features and then whatever makes it through, which is that is I think the standard methodology for arts programming, is the night before cancel 90% of the stuff and then act like it was supposed to be that way all along with a ever more larger artist statement. Yeah, it's a thing, man. You wouldn't understand. Like it's
it's
like
an art thing.
postmodern, and so we tried to avoid doing that. But intentionally like explore like this idea, like this one idea of it as a test bed for doing bigger and more complicated stuff, being able to build up onto it. The idea that you could maybe if you poked around in the basement long enough, then rooms open up and other things, or responds to you. Like the basement was intentionally chosen. I think as we talked about like the ideas of like narrative, like it's this enclosed space, so that kind of also we just sort of have an obsession with basements and bunkers and underground space. I don't really know what's going on with that. Both of us do this, so
Yeah, we should probably leave that part out.
yeah, don't. Would have to. We can't really explain that. It's,
All right. Well, it would explain your fascination for weather at the bunkers.
Actually, my Jeremy, who I'm met through my friend Mark. Mark is also obsessed with weather as well. So I have and I have another friend who's also obsessed with weather. Though each has their own obsession with weather. Jeremy's obsession with weather comes down to big weather systems. I don't know, but like watching it play out, like seeing like how huge systems play out, which is that kind of systemic thinking kind of plays into making it very easy to collaborate with as far as like the programmatic parts. Like Jeremy thinks in terms of systems and things like that. Like watching how like weather or earthquakes or things play out. Whereas say Mark is about finding the largest thunderstorm possible and being directly underneath of it while lightning strikes around us and we almost get killed. So everyone has their own interests. So.
Can I tag in really quick about the weather since you brought that up? But I won't go off because that's Jesus. That'd be like we could camp out on Skype for a week for me to fully answer that one. But I'll give the Cliff Notes, Spark Notes here that. Ever since I was a little kid, I loved the history of language, etymology. They actually had a thing in the LA Times. Here goes the Ferris wheel again, sorry. But they actually had a thing in the Sunday comics in the LA Times here in Los Angeles, that was like, did you know the history of this word? Oh, you know where this comes? And oh, did you know flapper actually is arguably the flapping of the upper galosh on a boot of a woman in the rain in the 20s that wasn't buttoned, and that's flapper, honestly. And you think it'd be the beaded dress and all the things we think of, or a police officer being called cop. One of the explanations is the copper heel of a boot. You hear a click, click, click on the foot traffic of Officer O'Shaughnessy in New York, and you go, oh, here he comes, put out those cigarettes, kids, or whatever. So anyway, so that's almost a tangent, but it was etymology, and I love writing, and I wrote little stories about weather that I would lose because I was a slob as a kid, as a total slob. And I'd find them in piles. Dad would go, clean your room. And I'd find a story of this incredible hailstorm. And I'd read it again. And I'd go, oh, yay. But I wrote it. And he's right. He's so smart. Because a lot of people like wondering, they're like, why are you into weather? It's weird. But he's right. The systems thing. So I was going to get a PhD in meteorology really quick. Because, I could go off on this. That was my plan. When I was 14, I actually had the application. And I pulled it out and pet it like a cat. It was for University of Colorado at Boulder. And I just put it away. And meanwhile, I was not getting the best grades. But let's not go there. But honestly, what he touched upon, and really quickly because it ties back to our collaboration, is I had to think a lot about it. I was like, of all the sciences, like physics fascinates me, chemistry, certain areas fascinates me. Quantum physics, I actually studied on my own all the time and just don't really talk about it. And I wasn't into quantum narrative, but I let that go because it would have just been an obnoxious narrative, basically. And we'd actually talked about that before. But anyway, so the thing about meteorology that most fascinates me ever since I was a kid is it's an inexact science. It's a mysterious, weird systems and failure science. And I think that goes back to the whole thing of why should things be finished. If you have a storm heading toward Seattle, Washington, or New York, or Los Angeles, and you take a snapshot and you go to work during that day and you go, oh, that was a storm. Within minutes, within hours, it changes again and again, the shape, the size, the dynamics of it. So when that storm finally comes, it's 20, 30 storms different. And then it hits the topography of the land, and then it hits certain things that were in place in terms of the air masses and all these crazy layers of, chaos and fractal kind of stuff. It's fascinating to me because it's so small to large and how I see language, I guess. So yeah, the weather parallel is definitely there.
Yeah, and I don't want to drag out your questions too long here, but like why we collaborate well, like I have a lot of interest in those areas again of like chaos and complex system stuff. I actually work for Wolfram Research, the people that do Mathematica and Wolfram Alpha, but he also did the New Kind of Science, which is basically like all about like kind of building on these ideas of computation and chaos and how simple systems can have complex results, they're unpredictable and that sort of thing. So that stuff is fascinated me for a long time. I did the NKS summer camp years ago. It's actually not called summer camp, it's called summer school, but I called it summer camp. But I worked for them off and on for a couple of years, and they hated me, and that for good reason. But I have like a similar interest in these sort of complex systems that are messy and not predictable, but somewhat computer modelable up to a certain point, and then not, and then those are sort of really fascinating subjects for me. So like we both, it's not just a writer and a programmer got together to do things. Like a lot of the structural programmatic elements come from ideas. Jeremy, the Ferris wheel starts spinning, and Jeremy comes up with something, and I go, aha, I can put that in code. Or we'll just get talking about stuff, and like imagery comes out. Like again, like recurrent imagery seems to show up between lots of the things we've done because of the sort of improvisatory nature of the online ephemeral work that you do and I jump in on and stuff. So we kind of know each other's things, so it works really well. So there's a complex, chaotic boundary between the programmatic and systematic elements of this and the writing parts of it. Though Jeremy did handcraft each of the words with a little hammer and chisel, like carving them out.
I love it.
Artisanally in my wood shop in upstate New York, of course.
Yes. You have a Vermont beard. Yeah.
Right.
Chisel beard, sorry.